Greetings YouTube, welcome back to the MetaNerd channel. I am Marcus, bringing you another video for Cardfight Vanguard Overdress. In this video, we will be going through the last of the starter deck archetype post DBT01, which is Seraph Snow. And of course with her bands of police women, I guess. So Seraph Snow, as we know, as an overall mechanic, she is a control type deck that focuses on basically imprison your opponent's rear guards or some cards from the drop zone to a order card, which is this card, a set order card, which function as a prison. So any card that enters the prison cannot be released until your opponent decided to pay a Counterblast 1 or a Soul Blast 1 to release either 2 or 1 unit respectively. So with that in mind, she basically forces your opponent to kind of spend more resources in order to get their stuff back, as most of Seraph Snow's skills are based on how many units is in the prison. For example, Seraph Snow requires 1 to plus 10k and will require 3 or more in the prison to gain a extra drive. So the more units that you are able to imprison from your opponent, the better. However, as a control deck, you tend to have a lesser power as compared to the other archetype, for example, Bruce, Virina, Bastion, and so on. The power is not really great unless of course you do factor in the overtrigger as well as persona ride. The whole mechanic also features a lot of draw power, and most of your units seems to have a higher shield value than normal. For example, there is a unit that actually gains a 5k shield if your opponent has a unit in the prison. If you're going against this deck, you do need to kind of research a bit on how they function if you're fighting against a Seraph Snow player, because this deck will punish any unaware player. Because most of the time I see online people play, most of them do not really know how to counter Seraph Snow, as they are unaware of the Counterblast 1 or Soul Blast 1 to release their units from the prison. However, for most experienced player, they soon realize that the weakness for this deck is actually do not call more than 3 rear guards. If you don't call more than 3, I mean, at most, if you could just call 2, most of her skill will not be. So if we move on to the right deck, of course, this is the only right deck that you can technically use in a Seraph Snow deck. Of course, I mean, you can always change the stutter since it does not really matter. The Great One helps you search for the prison card from your deck when you ride on top of him. If you go first, you can rest herself because you're not gonna attack. If you go second, remember to call either a rearguard in order to rest it and then set up the prison set order. The Grade 2 forces your opponent to actually a card from his or her hand to the prison card, which is actually really good. But then the downside is that your opponent is able to kind of play around it by putting something that has an on-play skill. This card basically forces your opponent to throw things out for you to at least unlock the first part of Seraph Snow skill, and of course the last one being Seraph Snow herself. For main attackers and Imprison unit, since most of your attackers are gonna be your Imprison unit, so I would tend to put them together, as you can see right here. The first card that we have is actually Alert Guard Gunner. This is all the way from the trial deck. His on-hit ability actually forces your opponent to guard him. For example, if you like have 2 rear guards, one is him and one is the other one that does not have an on-hit skill. If you do drive check into a critical, you can actually give the critical to the non-on-hit skill and the power to this unit, which technically will forces more cards from your hand, or better yet, force a sentinel from your opponent's hand. However, this is also pretty situational, because if your opponent does not have any rear guards that is on the field, then this card is not really the best, but an option is always an option. The next one we have is Grapple External. He himself is not a Imprison unit, but he does gives you the power that Seraph Snow as a whole lacks, since he will be hitting for 15k if your opponent have at least 1 card in the prison. Next, we have Security Patroller. Security Patroller is there for example, if you go first against Bruce, your opponent will kind of like, after riding Steve for your Bruce opponent, he will call the starter to the rear guard. So there are times where if your opponent is an experienced player, most likely he's going to call down a rearguard in order to pay the cost for Anger Richard's skill, which is to put one rearguard to soul to draw one. Security Patroller actually can do two things. One is to imprison both of the starter and the other rearguard that the Bruce player calls, as well as rush your opponent down. So it's actually a really good card. Next is Aurora Battle Princess, Agara Rogue. She does almost the same thing as Grapple External by gaining a 5k shield, but on top of getting that 5k power, she does get a 10k shield if your opponent has 2 or more cards in the prison card. She can be either a 15k attacker or a 15k shield unit. So she actually is the combination of both Security Patroller as well as Grapple External. But I'm just gonna put this here just so that you kind of know the significance of each card and also the potential of each card that brings to the deck. Since there is a little bit differences between Agara Rogue as well as Security Patroller. Security Patroller allows you to choose any rearguard to imprison, whereas Agara Rogue only targets the front row. So if your opponent does not have a front row, Agara Rogue does not really do much, except for being a 15k, but that is provided your opponent has 2 units in the prison. Whereas the requirement to unlock a 5k power is 2 or more, Grapple External only need 1 to be in the prison in order to unlock the 5k power. See the difference in the skill? Of course, this does not really address this to every single scenario, but an option is always an option. Next is the Bumblebee. His skill is active once per turn. Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1. Choose an opponent's rearguard, imprison it. After that, if your opponent has 3 or more imprison cards, you draw 1. Now, of course, this card should be in the utility support section, but then since this unit can allow you to imprison units, I'm gonna put this one here. Since you do not really have a lot of cards that actually helps you plus, for example, a draw, a counter charge, or a soul charge, this card is very much appreciated since it sends 1 rearguard to the prison as well as you draw 1 if your opponent has 3 or more units in the prison card. This card is a blast to use, and with his skill being an active, it is a very phenomenal card. Next we have is all the way from Festival Collection, we have Lemone. Now right before Lemone was released, this whole nation is performing really badly in terms of the meta because of the apparent flaw of the whole prison mechanic. But then with Lemone in the picture, she suddenly becomes very disgusting. Her skill is when this unit attack hits, you are able to choose 2 unit cards from your opponent's drop zone and imprison them. I mean, this card is almost the same as Alert Guard Gunner, but instead of only the rear guard, this unit is able to imprison cards from the drop zone. And what's more, you're able to choose those cards, which is insane. She is the perfect definition of a main attacker as well as an imprisoned unit. Now the best cards that you can actually put into the prison is actually triggers. Triggers are still units, so for utility support, we have quite a few. The first one, of course, is the Prison himself. The Prison himself does give you 3 soul when you do set him up at your grade 1 turn, because you definitely will want to set up, otherwise your grade 2 turn is basically wasted. Soul is never going to be a problem for Seraph Snow. However, if you do find yourself lacking in the soul department, you can always place another prison card on top of the prison card. The next one, of course, is the Kyanite Blue, the grade 1 unit. She is almost the same as the Bumblebee that we talked about earlier, but just that this girl is on place and you only need at least 1 unit in the prison in order to Counter Blast 1 and Soul Blast 1 to draw. Next, of course, is everyone's favorite Mecha Godzilla Bulbamine. This card, at first, when this card was in the market, everyone was selling this kind of cheap, but over the course, I think, of 2 to 3 days, this card just shot up like, I think, double or triple the value because of how good this card is. At the end of the battle that this card boosts, move himself to Soul to Counter Charge 1. I mean, come on, Counter Charge 1 is very rarely seen at the moment. Bulbamine will be a stapler card for any Brandt Gate deck. Next, of course, is defensive support. First off, we have the R2D2 that I spoke of in the beginning of the video. This card will only require your opponent to have 1 unit in the prison in order to get a 2k power as well as a 5k shield. So this basically is a 10k defensive unit. 10k is actually a very good shield value because if you play Overdress long enough, you will find that it's a little bit hard for you to throw 2 5k shield. I mean, of course, if you have 2 draw triggers in your hand, you can go ahead and throw them, but but then there comes a time where you don't really have 2 draw triggers. This card is actually really good. Now for the triggers, of course, you can run the standard 4, 4, 4, and 3, as well as 1 overtrigger, of course. The overtrigger, you should always run the Brandt overtrigger, no question. There is no way that you will want to run the starter deck's overtrigger over this because it's just too powerful. And that is all for this video. Do let me know down in the comment section of what do you think about Seraph Snow at the current meta. Is she strong? Is she able to keep your resources in check? Or it does not really matter how you spend your resources to release your units from the prison? Do like and subscribe if you like this video, and always remember to ring the bell notification icon just so that you won't miss any video that I upload. With that being said, I'll see you all on the field.